Minister of Ukraine, Mr. Denys Shmyhal. Are living through are devastating due to the brutal military aggression of our member state Russia against our member state Ukraine. For this blatant violation of the Statute of the Council of Europe, Russia has been suspended from its rights of representation in the Council of Europe. Our extraordinary session, which we started this morning and will last until tomorrow evening, will further discuss the consequences of this aggression by the Russian Federation against Ukraine and formulate a statutory opinion at the request of our Committee of Ministers. Mr. Prime Minister, I'm now honored to give you the floor.
Thank you so much.
Dear Mr. President,
Генеральна секретарка Ради Європи, шановні члени Асамблеї, дякую за запрошення виступити перед Асамблеєю і донести до кожного з вас голос українського народу, голос близько 100 націй і 100 національностей з різних куточків України, східних та
I want to tell you about the voice of every citizen of Ukraine, from the east or the west, from those areas that are free and those that unfortunately have been occupied, the voices of children and women who now have to hide in bomb shelters, and of course the voices of our military people who courageously for 18 days now have been resisting the Russian aggressors. The voices that for the past 3 years not everyone has heard or didn't want to hear, as they wanted to do business as usual with the aggressor. In spite of numerous violations by them of the international law and of the human values. When Russia was brought back, the Russian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly back in 2019, where you're gathering now, once again showed a poor understanding by the world of the real threat that Putin's regime is. Then Europe chose the road of pacifying the aggressor rather than defending the values, democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. For the past 18 days, the world finally opened up the eyes. We never closed our eyes, not for a second. 18 days of this open war, thousands of deaths, the loss of almost 90 children, thousands of Ukrainians without any food, any water, any heat, destruction of hundreds of schools, hospitals that have been shelled, nuclear power plants on the brink of a disaster. And that's at the time when Russia, according to the Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, vowed that it would promote the right to life and defend any person from unlawful violence. Dear members of the Assembly, the right to life is one of the key fundamental rights. And today, at the center of Europe, this right is being violated every minute and every second. For the leaders of the Russian Federation, there are no values at all. The Russian armed forces behave like terrorists. They bombard schools, kindergartens, hospitals. They kill children. They take them hostages. They kidnap representatives of the local authorities. They torture civilians, and all of that started 18 days ago. Violation of those fundamental rights and freedoms by Russia since the very beginning of the Russian aggression against Ukraine was discussed by the Assembly dozens of times. In the territories under Russian control, for 8 years, systemic reprisals have continued against anyone who does not agree with the aggressors. And today the Russian government is mobilizing the residents of Crimea to the armed forces of Russia, forcing people who are to be protected by the Fourth Geneva Convention to serve in the armed forces of the enemy state. A Russian military pilot is dropping bombs on his own mother in Poltava region. It's hard to believe that, but even such crazy things become a normal life for the aggressors. Every day we receive more and more news about violation of the freedom of speech, the right to live, to labor, to have medical services and education. All those actions have to be properly assessed by the international community. Dear members of the Assembly, today Russia is saying that there is no war, that nobody has declared this war, they're just conducting it. At this time, they're calling it a special military operation. We have confirmed information that more than 12,000 Russian soldiers have been killed, 389 tanks, 1,249 APCs, 77 fighter jets, 90 helicopters. I'm convinced that among you there are former military people. Just ask them whether in history there have ever been such special military operations that would have such consequences for a country that initiates this kind of military operation. Those flows of lie and hatred that are disseminated by the Russian media, the Russian propaganda, have to be stopped. Russian fakes have to be stopped that are trying to establish those lies in the Russian society. I can tell you that Russia and President Putin have started a full-scale war in the center of Europe that can become a third world war. Starting 2014, Ukraine has asked not to bring the Russian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly, not to bring them back. Today, the Russian delegation has stopped its work with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and I'm sure that this just reflects Putin's wish to avoid punishment and to restrict, to put an end to thousands of complaints and applications by Ukrainian citizens for all the crimes that he and his people have committed against Ukraine for the past 8 years. But we all know that punishment for genocide and terrorism cannot be avoided. And we have to be tough in our response. We demand that a decision is approved to immediately oust Russia from the Council of Europe. The ones who definitely support this non-provoked and unjustified aggression cannot stay in the single European family where human life is the highest value. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Ukraine is on fire. Hundreds of houses have been built. We're short of water, of light, of heat for millions of our people. We need to join our efforts not only to protect, to defend Ukraine, but to defend all of Europe today. We need to stop the aggression until a nuclear disaster comes in, until all of Europe is on fire. So, of course, we are demanding to close the skies over Ukraine, to close the sky for the sake of the millions of people in Ukraine, for the sake of European and world security. And at the end, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart to all the neighboring countries, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Moldova, Lithuania, and other countries of Europe for their support that they have given to our women and children, to all those who, on a temporary basis, have to look for shelter in your countries, and those who have found shelter, who have found warmth, hospitality, attention, all these values that are joined, that our common European family is rich with. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your solidarity, for your position, the solidarity that you are showing us. Glory to Ukraine, and glory to free and democratic Europe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. This assembly is not used to loud applause. Therefore, I think you can take this unanimous applause of this assembly as a sign of our support for the government of Ukraine, its authorities, and especially the citizens of your now beleaguered country. I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you took the time to brief you under very difficult circumstances, as we are all aware, about what is happening in Ukraine and the need that international solidarity, which is now seen and shown, has to remain and has to be strengthened. In this meeting of the Parliamentary Assembly, we will now examine the question posed to us by the Committee of Ministers whether Article 8 of our statute, written down already in 49, has to be further applied, which could lead to the exclusion of a member state of the Council of Europe for the first time ever in modern history. As you pointed out quite clearly, there is not only that the Russian army has crossed the borders of Ukraine in an illegal and an aggressive way, but it also has crossed the red lines of this organization. And that will not be without consequences. The precise measure, size of these consequences, as said, will be debated now and in the coming hours and tomorrow. May I again thank you. May I wish you strength and wisdom and courage. You have to be aware that not only the Council of Europe, but I think the vast majority of the international community stands with you and stands up against aggression by the biggest state on earth, who has shown to understand so little about international law and civilization. Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Stay safe and sound, and we wish you, your government, and your people well. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the communication from the Committee of Ministers to the Assembly, presented by Mr. Benedetto della Vedova, Under Secretary of State of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy. This will be followed by questions to Mr. della Vedova. Now, dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Benedetto della Vedova, Under Secretary of State, speaking on behalf of the Presidency of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. Mr. della Vedova, we are very pleased to have you with us today in this exchange of views. The Italian Presidency of the Committee of Ministers has indeed at a very difficult time for Europe and humanity. After the pandemic crisis in Europe, the Italian presidency is now facing this blatant violation of the statute of the Council of Europe from one member state against another. I would thank you for the effective cooperation, the communication and the dialogue between the Assembly and the Committee of Ministers and the Secretary General of the organization, especially since the beginning of the military aggression by the Russian Federation. And I would like to thank you for that. The consolidation of discussions and consultations within the trialogue format is ensuring our coordination and increases the impact of our work and allows us, together with the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, to remain united around our common values. Mr. Under Secretary, today we are here in this extraordinary session to discuss one of the most severe challenges that the European continent has faced. The military aggression by the Russian Federation towards Ukraine needs a coordinated response from all over the Council of Europe based on the core values of our work: human rights, democracy and the rule of law. We are looking forward to hear your intervention and the exchange of views with our members of the Assembly. Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
Signor Presidente dell'Assemblea parlamentare.
Mr. President of the Parliamentary Assembly, Madam Secretary General of the Council of Europe, members, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by joining your words of support to the Ukrainian Prime Minister. When I spoke to the first part session this year of the Parliamentary Assembly on the 25th of January, I reasserted Italy's conviction and my personal conviction that the Council of Europe is a fundamental part of the collective effort to counter global challenges. It is the continental emblem of the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and it is the expression of a multilateral vocation with which Italy fully identifies. We meet today just a couple of weeks after an attack was launched by Russia on Ukraine. This is a premeditated attack, despite the fact that until the very last minute, the Russian authorities talked about exercises on the border. We have seen and continue to see that a Council of Europe member state has attacked and invaded another member state and is killing its civilians. This appalling war of aggression, which is unprovoked, unjustified and unjustifiable, is against all the most elementary norms of international law and considerations of humanity, is continuing to cause one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes in Russia since the end of the Second World War, and perhaps the worst. The Russian offensive is continuing without cessation and in open violation of the norms of international humanitarian laws. It is striking children, women, old people, sick people, handicapped people, hospitals and schools and other civilian infrastructure indiscriminately. Civilian and critical infrastructure, including nuclear infrastructure, and causing appalling suffering to the people of Ukraine. The Russian Federation and Belarus, its ally in this appalling military campaign, is fully responsible for what is happening. And those who are responsible, those in charge and those who are carrying this out, will have to account for their crimes. And therefore we were pleased to see the decision of the International Criminal Court's Prosecutor General to open motu proprio, an inquiry into the war crimes committed in Ukraine, and the evidence is already being collected. We also welcomed the fact that the European Court of Human Rights was triggered by the Ukrainian government to identify individual measures against the Russian Federation. Italy has also firmly supported
initiatives promoted by Ukraine as part of the UN Council of Human Rights in order to denounce the appalling impact on human rights of this situation and to stress the accountability for the violations. We have been supporting and promoting the setting up of a fact-finding mission on violations and human rights abuses and the violation of humanitarian law in the context of this Russian aggression. At the OSCE, we have welcomed the triggering of the Moscow mechanism in the human dimension, which will see an independent expert mission sent to gather information and proof of violations and abuses committed by the Russian Federation in this war against the Ukrainian people. I would like to recall as well the appeal made by the leaders of the European Union at the European Council in Versailles, an appeal to the Russian Federation fully to respect its commitments under international humanitarian law, to guarantee safe humanitarian access and unimpeded access to victims and IDPs, and providing safe passage for civilians who wish to leave the country. Faced with this barbarity, which reminds us of the worst pages of the Second World War, the international community was unable to remain indifferent. The broadness of the political and diplomatic front against Moscow has been demonstrated by the United Nations General Assembly resolution approved on the 2nd of March with a majority of 141 votes, with only 5 votes against. And these are numbers that add to the almost unanimous condemnation of the whole world at what is happening in Ukraine. And it is revealing that even countries such as Cuba and China did not align themselves with Moscow, but abstained. The Council of Europe is the repository and custodian of the fundamental principles of coexistence, respect of human rights, the promotion of democracy and of the rule of law. And it has not remained indifferent, quite the opposite. It has been at the forefront of efforts to ensure a rapid, cohesive and firm reaction. On the 25th of February, the day following the invasion of Ukraine by the Russian armed forces, the Committee of Ministers, currently presided over by Italy, adopted an exceptional decision. It voted the immediate suspension of the rights of representation at the Council of Europe on behalf of the Russian Federation with reference to the Committee of Ministers and to your Assembly. The committee took this decision considering that the military attack against Ukraine means that the Russian Federation had gravely violated Article 3 of the statutes of the Council of Europe. This is an unprecedented decision in the history of our organization, made, as the President of the Assembly has just stated, made necessary by the situation of exceptional gravity. On the 2nd of March, the Committee of Ministers adopted an urgent resolution setting out the numerous legal and financial consequences of the suspension of the Russian Federation. On the 10th of March, the Committee of Ministers adopted a further decision launching a consultation with the Parliamentary Assembly. Today and tomorrow, you are called upon to express your indications, which, although not binding, will be precious for our future decisions. As things stand, the only reaction from the Russian authorities has been the discursive note, also dated 10th of March, of Foreign Minister Lavrov, in which he states, inter alia, that from now on, and I quote, Russia will no longer take part in this attempt by NATO and the European Union to turn Europe's oldest organization into a place where the mantras of the West supremacy and narcissism will be exalted. Let them have fun by themselves, said the minister, without the company of Russia, end of quotation. And this has not yet been followed up upon. Prior to this, the Committee of Ministers had already condemned very firmly the armed aggression against Ukraine and had urged the Russian Federation immediately and unconditionally to cease its military operations, reasserting our unwavering commitment to the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, from the beginning of the crisis, the Italian presidency of the Committee of Ministers has acted in close coordination with the Parliamentary Assembly and with the Secretary General. Tripartite statements on the 8th of March and the 15th of February demonstrate our firm commitment to the fact that this organization can speak with a single voice faced with this appalling war and this pitiless attack by the Russian government on the principles and values with which we identify. In this context, may I recall that the Joint Committee met the same morning as the Committee of Ministers when the decision to suspend the Russian Federation was adopted. That meeting provided the opportunity for the representatives of 46 governments to hear the opinions of the leaders of the political groups and other members of your assembly. Above all, it underlined the convergence of opinion between our committee and your assembly on the suspension of the Russian Federation. I would like to express my deep gratitude to President Cox for this excellent collaboration. Over and above the joint statements, the Italian presidency considers that it is essential to keep open a constant channel of contact with you, Mr. President, in order to ensure the cohesion and unity of our action. In a crisis situation such as that which we are passing through, it is essential for the two bodies of the Council of Europe to work jointly. We very much hope that the dialogue between the three institutions will be deepened when it comes to promoting or to continuing our decisions on further initiatives to be taken at the Council of Europe, carefully evaluating and in a unified fashion the impact of our decisions on the future of the citizens and the rights which we defend. Following not only the statutory obligations, but also because of our sincere conviction of the absolute point and use of close cooperation with the Assembly, we will listen closely to this debate here, and we are prepared to listen to and draw upon the results of your contribution in the Committee of Ministers on subsequent measures to be undertaken. This debate will immediately start after the exceptional meeting of the Assembly on the 17th of March. Our presidency will necessarily take account of the paths and indications and assessments which emerge from this session in the shaping of its own presidential program and events planned here up to the 20th of May. The firmness of our reaction and the extraordinary political value of the commitment of all of us in charge of this organization and the values which it represents do not diminish the sadness and indeed desolation that we feel, desolation at the appalling, terrible suffering of the Ukrainian people and the huge number of victims of this conflict, especially women and children, and sadness because the action of the Russian Federation has been a huge blow, but we hope not final blow, to our ambition of setting up a common European home and a community of ever stronger democracies. I'd like to recall that the Council of Europe's Vienna summit in 1993 saw the heads of state and government of our member states declare that Europe that Europe is the source of immense hope which must in no event be destroyed by territorial ambitions, the revival of aggressive nationalism, the perpetuation of spheres of influence, intolerance, or totalitarian ideologies. End of quote. These words are full of hope and determination, and they must guide our action and our future decisions, which means that the Council of Europe has worked tirelessly to keep this hope alive, and together we have set up a system to protect human rights and democracy which is unique in the world. It provides guarantees and hopes to the millions of citizens of Council of Europe member states, including the citizens of the Russian Federation. The huge responsibilities of the government of the Russian Federation must not diminish the absolute need to pay proper attention to the consequences of the measures which we adopt on the system of guarantees that the Council of Europe has built in order to protect the rights of all Europe's citizens. It is for us to continue the work underway without forgetting that our ultimate aim is to uphold the ideals of peace and justice on which the Council of Europe is based and which have been so appallingly overturned. These are the ideals which must guide us and inspire us as we face the terrible humanitarian situation which has come about. Almost 3 million refugees fleeing from Ukraine, according to the UNHCR, and 1.8 million internally displaced people. And it is the Ukraine Protection Cluster that gives us these figures. Italy is prepared to continue to the international effort and commitment to assist Ukraine and neighboring countries to cope with the difficulties caused by these huge flows of refugees and IDPs. We will make every effort to provide support, and we are committed to responding to the financial appeal made by the United Nations in order to manage the Ukrainian crisis. Italy has already welcomed about 28,000 people fleeing the fighting, and our commitment will continue to be supportive and concrete, and it will be in keeping with the spirit of welcome that has always characterized Italy's action in terms of migration in the European context. In this hall, I would like to recall the extraordinary commitment and the extraordinary efforts to welcome people made by Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and the Republic of Moldova, and Romania, that have provided help for Ukrainian refugees. This is a demonstration of their profound humanity and solidarity in the spirit of belonging that brings us together in the Council of Europe. Alongside the efforts being made and the implementation of existing instruments, Italy has also promoted innovative solutions in order to cope with this emergency. For instance, the use of property that is confiscated from organized crime. And this is something which is currently underway. These structures, once appropriate verifications of suitability have been carried out, will soon be available to be used. More than 110 million euros have been provided for the Ukrainian budget, and we have talked about the urgent measures in the humanitarian context which will be undertaken on a multilateral basis. In this context, Italy is ensuring its own support for the multilateral organizations active in Ukraine and in the region in order to provide assistance to the most vulnerable amongst us. Over and above the €1 million that has been provided for the ICRC immediately following the beginning of the Russian invasion, the Russian military invasions, military operations, we have looked at providing €25 million as a response to the appeals presented by the United Nations and the International Red Cross. This is a package to contribute to alleviating the suffering of millions of Ukrainians in difficulty, both inside the country and in neighboring countries. These financial contributions go alongside donations of assistance and material donations which required complex logistical operations. We have provided the Italian Red Cross with 5 tons of sanitary health kits, and also on the 7th of March we sent out material to the base, the United Nations base in Brindisi. This is a cargo of about 20 tons of humanitarian material, which will soon reach a center in Poland. In this spirit, Italy will continue to provide its contribution and to support this effort in order to make sure that we achieve an immediate ceasefire and effective humanitarian measures to mitigate tangibly the appalling suffering faced by Ukrainians. And it is terrible to see how the organizations of civil society and a multitude of ordinary citizens in our own countries, it's wonderful to see how they are welcoming refugees and making an attempt to provide relief for them. This is a wonderful thing to witness. As said in Versailles last week, we must praise the Ukrainian people for the courage demonstrated to defend their own country and shared values of freedom and democracy. Italy, holding the presidency of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, will not leave you alone. Thank you, President.
Assembly. And the applause may show that we really appreciate that. As I said in the beginning of this session, our session has 2 components. Today it's the moment to gather information. Tomorrow it is the moment to discuss and debate and to decide upon the information that we received. So I'm grateful for the information we got from the Prime Minister of Ukraine and your information, Mr. Undersecretary, and later we will get the information from our General Secretary of the Council of Europe. In order to save time and to give as many as possible people the floor, I now first ask the representatives on behalf of the political groups to ask their question of information and then you answer on the 5 of them together. First, I call on behalf of the group of Socialists, Democrats and Greens, Madam Selim Sayed Böke from Turkey. You have the floor, Selim.
This one? Okay. So thank you very much. Dear Mr. Undersecretary, I welcome you on behalf of the Socialist Democrats and Greens group at a time of devastating destruction with millions bearing immense uncertainty. We as a group have emphasized that it is time for crystal clarity in defending the core values of our very own organization. And in this capacity, we have 2 questions. First, given once again a dire humanitarian crisis we face, and given the unfortunate prospects of it prolonging, what further concrete steps does the Committee of Ministers plan to take to ensure those who are seeking refuge actually have access to their basic needs and rights, and that the responsibility is fairly and equally shared across Europe? The second question is, once the immediate, necessary and decisive steps are taken by the organization, what could be the further and future role of the Council of Europe, according to your discussions, to rebuild peace, to make sure that such aggression does not repeat itself?
Thank you very much, Selim, also to sticking to the time. Next, I call in the debate on behalf of the EPP group, Davor Ivo Stier from Croatia. Davor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Il Partito Popolare Europeo condanna fermamente l'aggressione della Federazione Russa contro l'Ucraina.
We condemn the invasion by Europe, and tomorrow we will be taking steps in our group. We would like to see rapid response on, we are pleased to see the rapid response on the part of the Council of Ministers.
Prevent any possible spill in other corners of Europe. And in this sense, the Western Balkans are always a very sensitive area. Can we expect the Italian presidency to, for example, further encourage Bosnia and Herzegovina to reform the electoral law in order to prevent instabilities? And do you envisage probably some other further activities in order to protect democracy and human rights in this region? Thank you.
Thank you, Davor. And now I call in the debate on behalf of the ECDA group, Christopher Chope from the United Kingdom. Chris, you have the floor. Microphone, Chris.
Sorry, it's technology, okay. Sir, can you give us an assurance that the Committee of Ministers at its meeting on the Thursday, the 17th of March, will vote to immediately exclude the Russian Federation from membership of the Council of Europe? And if not, why not? Surely the time for procrastination is over.
Thank you, Chris. Next, I call in the debate on behalf of the ALDE group, Mr. Rick Daams from Belgium. Rick, you have the floor online.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, dear colleagues. Words matter, but action matters more today. As ALDE group, we welcome what we have done, but we think that we can do more, we can do much more. As you flagged in your intervention, you said that more measures are needed. So my first question would be, what are the measures that you are thinking about as Committee of Ministers? But more importantly, as far as I'm concerned and ALDE group is concerned, all actions taken should be concerted, coordinated and synchronized between the statutory bodies, which is the Committee of Ministers, which is the Assembly and the Secretary General. Do you consider it appropriate and needed that we set up a task force of these three, associating, if need be, the Congress and even our own bank, in order to develop an additional set of measures that would address this terrible situation, put them into practice in a very transparent way, and make sure that all three of us always act together? So do you think that it's appropriate to set up a task force to take this on? Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And now, last in the list of speakers on behalf of the political groups, I call Mr. André Hunko from the UEL group from Germany. André, you have the floor.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, Herr Staatssekretär. Diese Versammlung ist sehr einig in der Verurteilung.
Thank you very much, President. Under Secretary of State, I think this chamber is very united on this issue, including my own political group. We agree that there is a need to provide humanitarian assistance to help out refugees, and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, I would have a question to put to you. The Committee of Ministers, what leeway, what possibilities would it still have in order to influence a ceasefire? To bring about a ceasefire, to bring about de-escalation, to avoid further escalation? Is that a possibility open to the Committee of Ministers? Are there any discussions? Thank you.
Respond to these 5 remarks from the political groups.
Grazie. Thank you.
Thank you, President.
By Ms. Book. The Council of Europe has a wide range of instruments, conventions, including the European Convention on Human Rights and bodies, Human Rights Commissioner, European Committee for the Prevention of Torture and Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, to help and guide member states in
Mr. Undersecretary, please ask again for the floor because you were disconnected. Yes, we have you back.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I start from the beginning. The answer to the question from Ms. Book. I was saying that the Council of Europe has a wide range of instruments, conventions, including the European Convention on Human Rights and Bodies, Human Rights Commissioner, European Committee for the Prevention of Torture and Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, to help and guide Member States in providing appropriate reception facilities and proper assistance to refugees. The Committee of Ministers recently decided to step up cooperation with other international organizations, including UNHCR. Allow me to recall that the Council of Europe was created after World War II. Its raison d'être is peace and solidarity among the peoples of Europe. All the Council of Europe's instruments are geared towards this goal. The Council of Europe has been pursuing an ideal of peace for more than 70 years with those states that so desire. Indeed, it is because the Russian Federation has distanced itself from this ideal by attacking Ukraine that we have to collectively suspend it from our organization. La seconda domanda di Ivo Stier.
I'd like to reply to the second question put by the Croatian representative of the EPP. I'd like to say that the Italian presidency condemns and will continue to condemn any and every attempt to discredit the Council of Europe. We are aware that launching a war against another country means that the aggressor will use the media as a weapon, and the best way to react is calm and firmness and working together in keeping with the Council of Europe's statute. The rule of law is a way of responding to the aggression, and member states must continue to be cohesive on common values and on the commitments that emerge from being a member of the Council of Europe. And the Russian Federation must recall that a suspended member cannot take part in our debate, but while it is suspended, it is nevertheless held to the rules of the organization. As regards what has been mentioned about Bosnia and Herzegovina, I visited Sarajevo a few weeks ago. This was a bilateral visit, but on that occasion I had the opportunity to speak with a number of interlocutors on the question of electoral reform and elections. And my hope is, I think this is very important for the stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina, I hope that there will be a rapid shared process of reform of electoral legislation. I also hope that it will be possible to hold elections at the date already fixed, because postponing the elections could give rise to a more difficult situation, a situation more difficult to control. And I recall this for the benefit of the interlocutors and in order sincerely to achieve the reform of electoral legislation and the holding of the elections as already on the date already decided.
From the United Kingdom, the issue of the activation of Article 8 is a top priority for the Committee of Ministers, which met already 7 times since the beginning of the crisis. On February 25th, the Committee of Ministers decided to suspend the right of the rights of representation of the Russian Federation, as we said. The Committee of Ministers will not refrain from its commitment to evaluating all possible further steps in the implementation of Article 8. The Committee of Ministers attaches the utmost importance to the opinion that the Parliament Assembly will deliver tomorrow. A meeting of the Committee of Ministers has been convened on Thursday to examine your opinion as a matter of urgency. If an expulsion decision is taken, it's not for the Presidency to decide when this decision will come into force. The decision is to be taken collectively by the 46 member states. As of now, all options are possible, of course, including expulsions, and we will wait also for the decision, the resolution that you are going to approve tomorrow. On the question raised by Mr. Rick Dems from the ALDE, the Council of Europe's support is primarily political and institutional. The Committee of Ministers acted very quickly, not only to suspend Russia, but also to express the Council of Europe's support for the Ukrainian authorities and our solidarity with the population. The Council of Europe has adopted a very ambitious action plan in Ukraine to support the country's efforts in its democratic reforms. Russia's military aggression has inevitably led to the suspension of its implementation. As soon as it is possible to take up our work, this action plan will be rediscussed and reoriented to address the new situation. Council of Europe is not a humanitarian organization. However, initiatives are being taken to alleviate the suffering of people without interfering with the work of humanitarian agencies. The Development Bank of the Council of Europe has already adopted measures, including grants, to help member states in providing assistance to Ukrainian refugees. Council of Europe has a wide range of instruments, including ECHR, Human Rights Commissioner, European Committee for Prevention, as I told before, of torture and inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment to help and guide member states in bringing proper assistance to the refugees. Well, about the task force, I got the point. I think that so far the coordination and cooperation among the three bodies of the Council of Europe, I think it's okay. We are working together. But of course, if in the future we will see that the coordination or cooperation is not enough, we can think also about something called task force. But I can say I don't know if the President agree with me that so far the coordination and cooperation is really okay and we work together. Thank you.
And the last question, you got a fifth question from Mr. Hunko.
Yes, sorry. About the de-escalation and ceasefire, of course we are following, but we are not involved in the negotiations that are taking place. First of all, the